Good morning and welcome to the February 2012 meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda for this morning?
Good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes 3 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order that protects consumers from unwanted auto-dialed or pre-recorded calls, robocalls, by adopting rules that ensure consumers have given prior express consent before receiving robocalls, can easily opt out of further robocalls, and will experience abandoned telemarketing calls only in strictly limited instances. Second, you will consider, as part of ongoing efforts to remove outdated regulations and reduce unnecessary regulatory burdens, a notice of proposed rulemaking and order proposing a staged approach to revising the licensing model for the cellular service from site-based to geographically based licensing. The proposal will offer greater flexibility and reduce regulatory requirements while enabling greater rural deployment of wireless service. The item also includes several other proposals to update the cellular service rules, as well as interim procedures for cellular service applications. Third, you will consider a report and order to extend outage reporting under Part 4 of the rules to interconnected Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP, service providers. Extended reporting will enable the Commission to fulfill statutory E911 obligations and help protect the growing number of Americans who rely on VoIP phone service. This is your agenda for today. The first item will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Joel Gurin, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gurin, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It has been over 20 years since Congress first acted to protect American consumers from the annoyance of having their family dinners interrupted by uninvited sales pitches, from running to answer the telephone only to experience dead air on the other end, or from having to pay for unwanted automated calls to their cell phones. However, despite the passage of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act and the Do Not Call Implementation Act, as well as FCC and Federal Trade Commission rules to implement them, the record in this proceeding shows that consumers continue to experience frustration with unwanted telemarketing robocalls. Indeed, unwanted telemarketing calls and texts remained among the top 3 categories of consumer complaints received by the FCC in 2011. The report and order before you takes further steps that are intended to provide consumers relief from the invasiveness of these calls. As a result of the Commission's actions, consumers will be less subject to the nuisance of unwanted telemarketing robocalls, and businesses subject to the jurisdiction of both this Commission and the FTC will benefit from a consistent federal regulatory approach. Because the action we take today mirrors the FTC's approach, the burden on industry to comply with the new rules will be minimal. Today's order also leaves in place the protections that wireless consumers have from unwanted non-telemarketing robocalls or texts. At the same time, it does not in any way impede consumers from receiving informational calls that they wish to receive. The report and order before you is a win for consumers. On a personal note, I am pleased to be sitting here before you today in my last meeting before stepping down as Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. The notice of proposed rulemaking that led to today's report and order was one of the first items I worked on when I arrived at the Commission, and I'm pleased to see it come to fruition today in such a positive manner for all stakeholders. With me at the table are Mark Stone, Deputy Bureau Chief of CGB, Kurt Schroeder, Acting Chief of CGB's Consumer Policy Division, and Karen Johnson, an Attorney Advisor in CGB's Policy Division, and Karen will present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The item before you today will strengthen the Commission's rules and give consumers additional protection from annoying, unwanted, auto-dialed, or pre-recorded telemarketing calls, also known as robocalls. These changes will maximize the consistency between the Commission's rules and the Federal Trade Commission's analogous telemarketing requirements as directed by the Do Not Call Implementation Act. In response to our notice of proposed rulemaking in this proceeding, a broad array of commenters supported the Commission's proposals for increasing consumer protection from unwanted telemarketing robocalls. This report and order will do 4 things to further protect consumers in this important area, which continues to be a source of significant consumer frustration and complaint. First, the order will require telemarketers to get prior express written consent before robocalling a consumer. The vast majority of commenters, individual consumers, consumer advocacy groups, banks and lending institutions, utility companies, retail associations, and marketing groups, favor a written consent requirement for telemarketing robocalls. The written consent requirement will help consumers better understand exactly what they are consenting to before saying yes to these robocalls, thereby reducing the number of unwanted calls they receive. In addition to conventional written consent, the e-Sign Act permits electronic alternatives such as email, text message, telephone key press, or recorded oral consent that will facilitate the consent process. Significantly, these changes will not affect the purely informational calls that consumers find useful, such as those related to school closings, usage alerts, or bank fraud notifications. Second, and consistent with the written consent requirement, the order eliminates the established business relationship exception to the consent requirements for telemarketing robocalls. Under this exception, telemarketers can currently make robocalls to consumers with whom they have previously done business, even when the consumer has not consented to such calls. In spite of this relationship, the record shows that consumers often do not welcome auto-dialed or pre-recorded telephone calls just because they have done business with a caller in the past. By eliminating this exception and requiring actual consent in all cases, consumers will gain additional control over the telemarketing robocalls they receive. This action mirrors the FTC's approach. Third, the item requires telemarketers to provide consumers with an automated, interactive opt-out mechanism during each robocall. The record shows that consumers continue to be frustrated with the difficulty of opting out of further pre-recorded telemarketing calls. They greatly prefer the convenience of an automated opt-out mechanism that allows them to immediately stop further robocalls with a key press, rather than forcing them to make a separate call to the telemarketer to stop further unwanted calls to their homes. Like the FTC's similar requirement, this rule change will give consumers a better tool to control the calls they receive. Finally, the item tightens the requirement that governs abandoned or dead-air telemarketing calls. Our record reveals that consumers understandably do not like the dead-air calls that interrupt their daily activities. Under the order before you, all telemarketing campaigns will have to comply with strict limits on dead-air calls, thereby depriving telemarketers the opportunity to average dead-air calls across multiple calling campaigns. This order will give consumers greater protection from the nuisance and frustration of unwanted and unexpected telemarketing robocalls. These actions also maximize consistency between our rules and those of the FTC, thereby reducing industry confusion about telemarketers' obligations. We recommend adoption of the item and request editorial privileges. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes it seems like there's no escape. The minute you sit down at the family dinner table or settle in to watch your favorite basketball team, the phone rings. And on the other end is not even an offshore telemarketer, but a pre-recorded voice. Today, the FCC is giving American consumers some help to keep a little more peace and serenity in their homes. We are carrying out Congress's intent to ensure that the FCC's rules regarding telemarketing robocalls are harmonized with those of the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. Such an effort makes good sense because there is no reason for industry and consumers to be confused by an array of inconsistent rules. This effort makes additional good sense because Congress told us to do it. Our action today enables consumers to first consciously invite these visitors into their homes, if so desired, by requiring telemarketers to obtain written consent from consumers, and second, ask them to stay away by requiring telemarketers to include a simple and easy-to-use interactive opt-out function as part of each call. Additionally, we strike a balance between protecting consumers' privacy on the one hand and, on the other hand, making the written consent requirements easy to obtain by electronic means, as contemplated by Congress in the year 2000 when it enacted the e-Sign Act. I also recognize that in an effort to harmonize our rules with the FTC's rules, our report and order is appropriately narrow in scope, limited to telemarketing robocalls. Our changes today do not affect current requirements regarding informational calls or calls involving charities or political speech. I'm also aware, however, that robocalls trigger debates over many other public policy issues, including assisting our public safety colleagues to eliminate robocalls dialed to public safety answering points. As such, I look forward to hearing from all interested parties, especially consumers and public safety, on how we can amend our rules more effectively. I thank the chairman and his team and the Consumer Bureau and staff for working on this proceeding, and I hope that everyone enjoys a quiet home tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. The order before us today is yet another victory for consumers. Very soon, there will be one less chance that they are distracted during dinner. They will also have an enhanced opportunity to watch their favorite primetime shows without unwanted interruptions from telemarketing robocalls. No longer will telemarketers solely be able to rely upon the established business relationship exception. By requiring written prior consent, consumers will be making an affirmative and definitive choice whether or not to receive telemarketing robocalls. However, should consumers change their minds and decide that they no longer want to receive even those calls, they will soon be able to easily opt out at any point during a call through the automated functionality we now require. This order is also a win for industry. We are ensuring that our rules are as consistent as possible with the FTC's rules, thus making compliance with the rules for both agencies more straightforward. In addition, we are permitting telemarketers to rely upon electronic signatures, including emails, which we expect will make it easier to comply with the prior written consent requirement. We are also clarifying that informational robocalls, such as school closings and prescription refill reminders, are not classified as telemarketing calls for the purposes of these rules. Overall, this is a well-balanced order. Consumers are not as likely to be annoyed by unwanted telemarketing robocalls, and as such, will be more likely to show interest in the goods and services being offered, and those authorized telemarketers may in turn find a higher percentage of success from their marketing campaigns. I wish to thank the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau for its hard work on this report and order.
Thank you very much. I have a written statement that I'll submit for the record. Let me just make a few points about this important action. Consumers have complained to us by the thousands about annoying robocalls, and today the Commission unanimously is taking action. The fundamental principle underneath the action we take today is consumer empowerment. The changes we make today, the order we adopt today, will require written opt-in, and it will make it easy for consumers to opt out. We're closing loopholes that have allowed robocallers to sneak through gaps in the older rules. And we're harmonizing our rules with the Federal Trade Commission's rules in a way that makes sense for everyone involved. This will result in exactly what my colleagues described, fewer annoying, unnecessary interruptions, and I very much appreciate the work of the Consumer Bureau in putting this together and for your focus on smart, sensible steps to empower consumers, provide consumer choice. I want to thank my colleagues for their work and input on this item. In my office, Sheree Smith and Jessica Allman both worked very hard on this. This is a strong and important action for consumers. I'm glad we're doing it, and I'm happy to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, so ordered, and the request for editorial privileges is granted. Thank you very much. Excellent work. Madam Secretary, please announce our next item.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. It is entitled Amendment of Parts 1 and 22 of the Commission's Rules with regard to the cellular service, including changes in licensing of unserved area. Amendment of the Commission's Rules with regard to relocation of Part 24 to Part 27, and interim restrictions and procedures for cellular service applications.
Mr. Kaplan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners McDowell and Clyburn. Mr. Chairman, you've instructed the bureaus and offices across the agency to identify and reform rules and regulatory regimes that inhibit investment and innovation and that create unnecessary administrative burdens on industry. In some cases, that task is quite simple, both in terms of the identification and the remedy. In others, however, both recognizing an area for improvement and developing a plan for reform can be quite complex. The item we present to you today, concerning an overhaul of our cellular service licensing system, undoubtedly falls into the latter category. Thanks to the hard work and creativity of the Wireless Bureau's Mobility Division and the extensive input we have received from industry players, both large and small, we have identified an area where we can both significantly reduce administrative burdens on licensees and bring into parity the grandfather or grandmother of commercial mobile services, the cellular service. As you will hear from Nina in a moment, we have developed a proposed transition of the cellular service licensing system that seeks to address the many challenging issues raised in migrating any licensing system. We are eager to work closely with our licensees and other interested parties to end up with a smart and dynamic product to make our vision a reality in the coming months. I am pleased to have joining me at the table today Roger Noel, the Chief of the Bureau's Mobility Division, Lloyd Coward, Deputy Chief of the Division, and Nina Shafran, Senior Attorney in the Division. Nina, who has done an outstanding job throughout this process, will present the item. Nina?
Thank you, Rick. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I am pleased to present this notice of proposed rulemaking and order. The notice proposes a transition for the cellular service from a site-based licensing model to a geographic area-based model in 2 stages. Under the current site-based licensing rules, cellular licensees must submit applications and seek prior Commission approval every time they make any change to their system that would expand their licensed area boundary, no matter how small the change. These applications must include significant technical data and maps showing the proposed transmitter locations. The process is burdensome and time-consuming for licensees and Commission staff as well, and may even delay technological upgrades that have only a minor impact on the licensed area boundary. At this advanced stage of cellular service, the process is yielding diminishing returns, especially in markets that are almost completely licensed already. As Rick noted, the primary purpose of the notice is to eliminate these administrative burdens and give licensees new flexibility in their operations. The proposal would put them more on par with licensees in other flexible wireless services, such as broadband PCS. At the same time, the notice recognizes the public interest benefits of continuing the current process for some defined period in markets that are less built out. There is a much smaller volume of applications in such markets where service tends to become economically feasible gradually. Site-based licensing allows all interested parties, including new entrants, the opportunity to file applications for specific areas as needed without competitive bidding in most cases. Recognizing the current advanced state of cellular licensing, the notice proposes a 2-stage transition to geographic area licensing through competitive bidding. Cellular overlay licenses would be offered in Stage 1 for all cellular blocks that meet a proposed substantially licensed test. Site-based licensing would continue in all other blocks for a proposed 7-year period, and then overlay licenses would be offered for them through auction in Stage 2. In anticipation of this notice, the Bureau created a digital version of every map of record for every authorized cellular service area. The data which we used to calculate the licensed and unlicensed area in each cellular block will be available to the public through the Commission's website. Based on the data, about 80% of all cellular blocks meet the test for inclusion in Stage 1 of the transition. Under the proposal, in most cases, overlay licensees would be free to modify their systems without Commission filings, thereby minimizing their regulatory burdens. Each overlay license would be issued for the entire cellular block, but the overlay licensee would be obligated to protect incumbent licensees' operations from harmful interference. Licensed area that is relinquished by an incumbent in the future would not be returned to the Commission's auction inventory. Instead, it would be available immediately for service by the overlay licensee on a primary basis without being subject to competitive bidding. The proposal thus facilitates prompt service to such area through reduced administrative burdens. The notice proposes that all cellular licensees be subject to a field strength limit at their respective license boundaries. To further reduce administrative burdens, the notice proposes several other changes to the cellular licensing rules, including proposals to eliminate or streamline provisions and data collection requirements that may no longer be necessary going forward. The notice seeks comment on several alternatives to the proposed two-stage transition. These include transitioning all cellular blocks at the same time in a single auction, as well as proposals by industry stakeholders that would not entail competitive bidding. The companion order imposes a limited application freeze and certain other interim procedures. Rather than suspending all modification and new system applications, the freeze is tailored to allow continued expansion of service to consumers. The freeze and other interim procedures in this order are consistent with prior transitions and will help ensure an efficient rulemaking. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking in Order and requests editorial privileges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's proceed to Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we do see comment on a comprehensive proposal to make the Commission's cellular service rules consistent with those of virtually all other commercial wireless services. Updating these rules will offer greater flexibility to construct and operate facilities within a larger geographic area and commence operations without prior Commission approval, thereby reducing regulatory requirements. Adopted decades ago, the current site-based cellular licensing rules are now obsolete and create unnecessary burdens for both licensees and Commission staff. Given our aim to modernize and streamline our licensing processes and to create parity among competing mobile providers, I'm pleased to support this notice and the associated order. The notice is detailed and broad in scope, setting forth an array of ideas. The order, suspending certain filings associated with cellular licensing, will permit the orderly and effective resolution of the fundamental changes and issues raised today. I thank the Chairman for bringing these matters forward, as well as to the very talented team in the Wireless Bureau for your thoughtful and creative work, and I look forward to engaging all interested stakeholders as we debate pros and cons regarding some of these ideas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Last July, President Obama issued an executive order directing independent agencies to identify, repeal, or modify rules that are outmoded or excessively burdensome. Based on the record thus far, I agree that many of the site-based licensing rules of the 800 megahertz cellular radio telephone service meet the executive order's standard. When the FCC established the initial rules for allocating this cellular service some 30 years ago, it adopted a hybrid licensing approach. Original service licensees were given 5 years to build networks in any part of the geographic location. Any area which was not built out during that time period was then relinquished, and the FCC would subsequently relicense those unconstructed areas on a site-by-site basis. This licensing approach helped to drive construction of mobile wireless networks across this nation. But now we find that many of the site-based rules in the cellular service have become outdated. The existing technical rules for this service define a cellular carrier service area based upon analog signal propagation. As a result of the Commission's 2002 order, which established the sunset of analog cellular service rules, analog service is generally no longer being offered. Therefore, it no longer makes sense to define a cellular service area based on analog signals. Over the years, the Commission has also learned that there are a number of administrative costs associated with site-based licensing. Under the current rules, a cellular licensee making any system change that would expand or decrease its service area must file an application with comprehensive engineering data. Geographic area licenses, especially when used in more metropolitan areas, obviate the need for these numerous filings. Therefore, these licenses allow providers to more rapidly deploy and modify facilities within their licensed area. Of all the licensed services that providers use to offer consumers commercial mobile wireless service, the 800 megahertz cellular service is the only one that still incorporates site-based licensing. So eliminating site-based licensing rules when they no longer make sense appropriately promotes more rapid network deployment and furthers regulatory parity. There are a number of important proposals in this notice of proposed rulemaking, such as awarding overlay licenses through competitive bidding, allowing licensees to use secondary market measures to spur deployment, and the use of bidding credits to encourage small businesses to enter the mobile industry. I strongly encourage the industry and the public to carefully consider all of the proposals in this item. I am particularly interested in hearing how these proposals, or any alternatives, could promote more competitive options for consumers. I commend Rick Kaplan and his staff of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau for their hard work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Rick, I think you framed this issue very well when you started your comments. Sometimes making progress on our goal of reducing regulatory burdens and achieving regulatory parity and modernizing our rules is easy, and sometimes it's hard. And I want to commend you and the team that's here and others in the Wireless Bureau for tackling the challenge of achieving these goals around the old licensing system of 800 megahertz. It's not the first time the Wireless Bureau has done this. The wireless backhaul proceeding from a couple of months ago was similar in concept, looking at the old way that the Commission has done things and saying, how do we modernize, reduce regulatory burdens here, recognizing that it's not that simple, that transitions are required. But at the end, we will have achieved something valuable in terms of efficient operation of the FCC, reducing burdens on licensees, and, as Commissioner Clyburn said, having overall mechanisms that most efficiently encourage deployment and competition. So I appreciate you taking this on. As I think Nina said, maybe it was you, Rick, this particular band is where it all started, the 800 megahertz cellular band, the first place that the Commission started mobile service. Commission at the time, as others have mentioned, used a site-based system. Since then, we've recognized as a Commission that that's not the ideal way to license, but this has persisted. And the Bureau has come up with and proposed a way to transition from the old system to the new system in a way that looks like it makes a great deal of sense. Doing that will have the result of regulatory parity. Licensees who have spectrum in different bands won't have to worry about different compliance mechanisms in the different bands. I'm pleased that the notice also proposes eliminating several data collections that we've concluded for the moment are no longer necessary. I think the number is 7, which would bring us to 32 data collections that we believe are unnecessary and that we are moving to eliminate. These 32 data collections come on top of elimination of over 210 now outdated regulations that the Commission is moving to eliminate. As others have said, this is consistent with the executive orders that called on federal agencies to review rules and regulations and ensure that they're cost effective and don't place unnecessary burdens on businesses. I want to thank the outside entities who helped spur this with a petition encouraging us to take a look at it, CTIA and NTCA and RTG, the Rural Telecommunications Group. Again, I want to thank the work of the Bureau, the work of each of my colleagues, of their staffs, Amy Levine and Jessica Almond on my staff. Looking forward to moving this quickly to conclusion and continuing to generate constructive, creative ideas from the Wireless Bureau and all the bureaus and offices at the agency on how to achieve our goal of the FCC being a model of excellence in government. With that, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, so ordered, and the request for editorial privileges is granted. Thank you all very much. And Madam Secretary, please announce our third and last item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the final item on your agenda today will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. It is entitled, The Proposed Extension of Part 4 of the Commission's Rules Regarding Outage Reporting to Interconnected Voice over Internet Protocol Service Providers and Broadband Internet Service Providers.
Thank you. Take your time. And Admiral, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm pleased to be here today with my colleagues from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau to present this report in order to extend the Commission's outage reporting rules to interconnected voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP, service providers. This report in order represents another milestone in advancing the Commission's goals of improving the reliability and resiliency of the nation's 911 system. When a person is in a life-threatening situation and needs to call for help, it should not matter what technology the home telephone service employs. A 911 call using VoIP should be just as reliable as traditional telephone service. By extending outage reporting to VoIP in this order, the FCC also extends to interconnected VoIP the reliability that outage reporting has brought to legacy communications. Data is the key ingredient to increase reliability. The Commission's current outage reporting process supplies crucial data about the legacy voice and paging technology and why those outages occur. We've worked with industry to find the root cause of problems that are difficult to solve without a broad and in-depth view of what's happening across all networks. That data analysis has generated tremendous and measurable improvements in reliability, including the ability to complete 911 calls. But as the public's use of technology changes over time, so must our analytical tools if we are to ensure that, during an emergency, a consumer's 911 call will go through regardless of the voice communications technology the consumer is using. Americans are increasingly using interconnected VoIP service instead of traditional telephone service, so much so that today we estimate that approximately 31% of residential wireline subscribers have interconnected VoIP service. The Commission's existing outage reporting requirements, however, extend only to services delivered over legacy voice and paging communications technology. As a result, the Commission has been unable to determine the reliability and resiliency of those aspects of the nation's 911 infrastructure related to interconnected VoIP calls. With this jump in VoIP, it's not surprising that in just the past 2 years alone, consumers in several regions of the nation have experienced significant disruptions in their interconnected VoIP services. Consumers who have been reportedly affected by interconnected VoIP service outages include those in the areas such as the states of Georgia, New Hampshire, Tennessee, Texas, and Washington. The ability to analyze the root causes for large interconnected VoIP service outages is essential to ensuring that the public is able to make emergency calls to summon help, particularly when facing life-threatening situations. The report and order that we present for your consideration today is a critical step in addressing this need. I appreciate what the communications industry has done for reliable communications, especially reliable 911 communications. And I appreciate the carriers, cable providers, VoIP providers, and ISPs who provided us with valuable input in this proceeding. Allow me to express my appreciation to the Office of General Counsel, the Wireline Competition Bureau, and the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis for their dedicated assistance. And I'm very proud to have with me at the table members of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Jeff Goldthorpe, our Associate Bureau Chief for Cybersecurity and Communication Reliability, and he's also the Acting Chief of the Division, and we refer to it as CCR. Lauren Kravitz, the Deputy Chief of CCR, John Healy, our Assistant Chief, Greg Antosha, our Special Counsel in CCR, and Vern Mosley, a Senior Engineer in CCR, and one of our cyber experts. I also want to thank Lisa Folks, our Deputy Bureau Chief in this area, and Jennifer Manner and her Strategic Communications team, including Tamara Lipper-Smith. CCR Special Counsel Greg Antosha will present the item.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The report and order that we present this morning extends the Commission's communications outage reporting requirements to interconnected voice over Internet Protocol VoIP service providers. Today's action will ensure that when a person calls 911 for life-saving help, reliable phone service will be available whether the person is using traditional telephone service or service that operates by interconnected voice. That's reliable 911 life-saving help. The Commission's current outage reporting rules provide critical information on legacy voice and paging communications, which has facilitated significant improvements in our nation's 911 communications network. Since establishing the current rules in 2004, the Commission has been able to facilitate a significant reduction in the number of lost 911 calls due to network failure over legacy systems. For example, in 2008, wireline providers experienced a spike in outages which resulted in a decrease in reliability of 911 services. Through its collection and analysis of outage reporting data, the Commission identified the root causes of this trend and then, working with industry, developed a number of industry best practices that reduced the estimated number of lost 911 calls by 40%. Such dramatic reductions would not have been possible without the bigger picture of the industry network reliability provided by outage reporting and the sharing of outage data among the Commission and industry experts. America's pattern of communications usage has been changing rapidly in recent years. Interconnected VoIP services are fast becoming ready alternatives to voice communication services provided by older legacy communications technologies. Accordingly, according to recent information, approximately 31% of residential wireline subscribers have interconnected VoIP service. Consequently, today, a substantial volume of 911 traffic is delivered by interconnected VoIP service providers, and therefore this service is a form of communications to which we can expect Americans will turn in times of crisis. Despite this increased shift towards greater use of interconnected voice, or VoIP, there have been a number of interconnected VoIP outages reported in the media. For example, according to press reports in May 2010, a service outage involving AT&T's UVerse platform and a server failure impacted UVerse interconnected VoIP service in AT&T's entire 22-state phone service area, an area serving approximately 1.15 million customers. According to these reports, the outage lasted for several hours. There have been a number of other similar types of outages by other providers affecting whole communities that have been reported in the press. Unfortunately, because the current outage reporting rules do not apply to interconnected VoIP service outages, the Commission has had virtually no way of analyzing or working to assure that the 911 capability and reliability for this important service. Today's report and order will fix this problem. By extending the outage reporting rules to interconnected VoIP service, the Commission will ensure that all consumers have access to reliable and resilient 911 system no matter whether they are using traditional telephone service or interconnected VoIP. Today's action is consistent with the FCC's statutory obligation under Section 615A1 of the Communications Act, as well as executive orders and presidential directives. In Section 615A1, Congress imposed a duty on each IP-enabled voice service provider to provide 911 service and enhanced 911 service to its subscribers in accordance with the requirements of the Federal Communications Commission. In addition, by presidential directives and executive orders, the FCC has been assigned a critical role in the nation's emergency preparedness and response efforts. Presidential directives and executive orders and their implementing documents charge the FCC with ensuring the resiliency and reliability of the nation's commercial and public safety communications infrastructure. We believe that the objectives of today's action track closely with the same important underlying objectives and roles for the Commission. Under the new rules, both facility-based and non-facility-based interconnected VoIP service providers will be required to report significant outages. The report and order establishes reporting criteria and technical thresholds that define the conditions that will trigger a reportable outage. The report and order also addresses reporting process requirements and protection of collection information. It applies most of the existing outage reporting process for legacy systems to interconnected VoIP service providers with only notification and reporting changes to reflect differences in technology. Under the new rules, outage reports will be filed electronically through the Commission's Network Outage Reporting System, or NORS. With respect to protection of information reported, the rules will treat the information as confidential in the same manner that information is currently treated when reported under NORS. The rules set forth in today's report and order were written after carefully considering other alternatives. We believe that the rules reflect the most effective way of ensuring the Commission's goals are met with respect to 911 system, while doing so in a cost-effective manner. Most, if not all, of the information that will be collected is information that providers already collect for their own business purposes. Further, the rules require only the reporting of significant hard down or complete outages, and the providers can track them using the same common measurement tools that they typically already use in evaluating the delivery of services to customers. The report and order reflects a targeted effort to ensure the resiliency and reliability of aspects of our nation's 911 system as it relates to interconnected VoIP. It will improve the Commission's visibility into the reliability of interconnected VoIP service, a service on which Americans in large numbers are increasingly relying upon, both for their routine and emergency 911 calls. Ultimately, we believe the extension of Part 4 to interconnected VoIP will ensure that our critical communications infrastructure is prepared when emergencies arise. Consumers across the nation will benefit by our addressing the underlying important public safety and homeland security concerns. The Bureau recommends adoption of the report and order and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McDowell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, we do act to collect important data regarding service outages experienced by interconnected VoIP providers and, more importantly, their customers. My colleagues and I agree on the vital importance of voice calls, especially those to 911. All Americans rightly expect their emergency calls to go through, even though most may not be aware of the technologies involved, how the systems operate, or their regulatory treatment. I'm grateful to all of the commenters for sharing their important insights and marketplace experiences regarding network outage reporting in response to last year's notice of proposed rulemaking. Given its narrow scope, I'm voting to approve today's order. Although our notice of proposed rulemaking discussed an array of regulatory mandates, today we adopt reporting requirements only in instances of a complete loss of interconnected VoIP service. There is a long-standing recognition that ensuring clear and effective communications in times of emergency is a key aspect of the Commission's mission. Collecting data on significant outages from VoIP providers will help the Commission in its duty to ensure that the reliability and resiliency of our nation's 911 voice systems, consistent with Congress's mandate set forth in Section 615A1 of the Communications Act. Moreover, in the reporting context, we put VoIP providers on par with wireline and wireless voice service providers who already submit this information to the Commission and have for some time. It is important to emphasize that we are not imposing these rules on broadband service providers, whether wireline or wireless. As I've stated many times before, the Commission does not have the legal authority to regulate broadband in such a way. I thank the Chairman for his willingness to accept edits to provide greater clarity regarding the narrow scope of the rules we adopt today, as well as to curtail the possibility of broadening their applicability. I have every confidence that industry will continue to work with the Commission on network outage matters for the benefit of protecting the safety and security of the American people. And as always, I thank the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and for those of you watching on TV who thought that CCR stood for Creedence Clearwater Revival, it doesn't here at the FCC. And you all have much better haircuts than they did back in the 70s, too. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. With today's order, the Commission takes an important step to improve the reliability of an advanced communications network that has, over the past few years, become increasingly popular. I will not tell whose cell phone that was. In 2008, Congress believed that Voice over the Internet Protocol service was becoming such an integral part of the nation's communications infrastructure that it passed the Net 911 Act. This federal law states that it shall be the duty of each IP-enabled voice service provider to provide 911 service and enhance 911 service to its subscribers. The Net 911 Act also required VoIP service providers to comply with any rule changes the FCC might adopt for this 911 service. Developments since the enactment of this statute underscore how important it is that Americans have the ability to make 911 calls through interconnected VoIP networks. As of December 2010, almost 32 million American households and businesses have interconnected voice subscriptions. That number represents an increase of 46% between December 2008 and December 2010. However, over the past 2 years, there have been a number of news reports of lengthy VoIP outages. As was mentioned in one case, a carrier experienced an outage where more than 1 million customers lost their service for over 4 hours. The FCC has a mission-essential function of ensuring continuous operation of critical communication services. So when we hear news reports about VoIP service outages, it is incumbent upon the Commission to do everything in its power to prevent such outages in the future. As the item explains, the Commission has been able to improve the emergency readiness of traditional services, such as voice and paging services over wireline, wireless, cable, and satellite networks. And it has been able to make these improvements through a light regulatory touch. By that I mean the Commission uses outage reporting requirements to facilitate the development and use of voluntary best practices instead of relying on measures such as mandating specific levels of performance. What we are doing today is applying the same regulatory light touch to improving the reliability of interconnected voice services. I also agree with the item's decision not to impose reporting requirements for outages of broadband internet service. Although the notice of proposed rulemaking proposed such requirements, the record in response revealed technical issues that the staff must study before imposing reporting requirements on this service. I am encouraged, however, that the record also reveals a willingness of the industry to participate in a voluntary process to help the Commission study these technical issues. As I have said before, collaboration by all stakeholders is the best approach to address difficult issues. We have seen this approach work well in other public safety contexts, such as E911 location accuracy requirements for wireless service providers. Today is another example of this successful approach. I thank the various stakeholders who have worked with the staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau to arrive at the rules we adopt today. The collaboration and input from VoIP service providers, state and local governments, and others, such as my former colleagues at NARUC, enabled the Commission to arrive at an important reporting requirements that are not burdensome. I commend the Chairman and the Admiral for their leadership in this important proceeding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With today's action, the FCC is helping ensure that our communications infrastructure is more resilient. Our action today helps ensure that consumers will have access to reliable phone service, particularly when calling 911, whether they're using a traditional telephone or whether they're using interconnected VoIP. Public safety is a core mission of the FCC. We are working on this on many fronts. We're working on improving 911 service and reliability on many fronts, particularly next-gen 911. Last year, we laid out a 5-point plan on the transition to next-generation 911. The plan calls for the development of location accuracy mechanisms for NG 911, enabling consumers to send text, photos, and videos to 911, facilitating the completion and implementation of NG 911 technical standards, developing an NG 911 governance framework, and developing an NG 911 funding model. The plan will increase public access to 911, provide enhanced information to first responders, increase the reliability of 911 networks. The Admiral and his team at the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau are hard at work on all the various steps that are required to bring 911 into the next generation. And we have launched proceedings, and we're working with CISRIC, our advisory council in these areas, to make progress. The action we take today is part of this broader effort to ensure that 911 continues to work to meet consumer needs and expectations, even as the technology changes. And we recognize that to do that, the Commission needs information that it doesn't now have. Earlier today, we proposed eliminating 7 data collection requirements. I mentioned we've eliminated a total of 32 or 27, now I can't remember the number, but that order of magnitude. This is one where we all agree that changes in technology require us to add data collections to our arsenal. And as the Bureau and as my colleagues have explained, it's essential. It's also based in the experience that the Commission has had in the outage reporting requirement for basic telephone service working well. It's been in place for a number of years, and as the Bureau has documented, it has resulted in improved reliability for 911 calls. It is a system that is working. When 31% of the public has telephone service today, not through traditional telephone, but through VoIP, it's clear that we need to do what we're doing today, which is update the outage reporting system that works to meet the ways that consumers are making telephone calls. We saw relatively recently how important this is. During emergencies like Hurricane Irene this past summer, the Commission didn't get the information that it needed about VoIP outages. It's a glaring gap that I'm pleased we're closing today. What we're doing today is implementing one of the lessons learned from Hurricane Irene and the assessment that Admiral Barnett led after that disaster to determine what was working, what wasn't working about our system, and to make sure that we tackle the issues that we need to tackle. Technology continues to change. Public safety is a core mission of the FCC and will continue to be vigilant to ensure reliability as communications technologies develop. For example, we intend to work with Internet service providers on mechanisms for voluntary reporting of broadband outages, and I join Commissioner Clyburn in thanking the industry for their indications in the record that they will work with us on addressing the issues to make sure that we can work together to ensure a reliable communications infrastructure and emergency communications. So thank you to Admiral Barnett, to all of you for the work on this item, but at least as importantly, the underlying work it reflects. You all wake up every day and ask, what do we need to do to make sure that our communications infrastructure in the United States protects public safety? And we very much appreciate, on behalf of all of us, your service every day to do that. I want to thank all of the participants in the proceeding. We developed a strong record that was very helpful in reaching the result today. And thanks again to my colleagues, their staffs. Josh Gottheimer in my office worked very hard on this. And with that, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, so ordered, and the request for editorial privileges is granted. Thank you all very much. Now, do you have any personnel announcements?
I do.
Today you do, and Commissioner Clyburn, you don't. Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't remember what we usually do. But go ahead.
Very good. We can only talk like this in a public meeting. Isn't that sort of silly?
Don't listen.
No, she can. It's a public meeting. So before we move on to some goodbyes, we have a hello. So in my office, one of the law clerks who could not join us at the last meeting, Sarah Lagan. Sarah, you want to stand up? I'm going to talk about you for a second. Hope your folks are watching at home on the internet. So Sarah is a second-year law student at American University, where she's on the Administrative Law Review. She's also excelled in their legal rhetoric program, which comes in handy in Washington, D.C. She is a 2008 graduate of Duke University. That's just a coincidence. Where she was a major in art history, thus requiring her need to go to grad school to get an employable skill. She's been a legal extern for a court in Maryland. She has been a legal intern at CTIA. And, of course, does have a love of the arts. She has worked at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, as well as the Govinda Gallery, where she was editor for, I always like interesting things like this in a resume, Soul Rebel, an intimate portrait of Bob Marley. So we've mentioned Creedence Clearwater Revival and Bob Marley in the same FCC meeting today, so I think that's got to be a first. So we want to welcome you. She's already done some terrific work, and we have a lot more to do this spring. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, and welcome. Welcome also to Austin Randazzato. I'm not sure if he's here, but he is helping in the chairman's office right now, and we appreciate his service. There he is. Welcome. And I do have a couple of goodbyes today, 3. First, Joel Gurin. Joel, I'm so glad that you were able to present an important item today at your last meeting as chief of our Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Joel came in 2009. Joel brought with him terrific background, including experience bringing consumer reports into the digital age. His sophistication about the real-world perspective of consumers and the practical things that can be done, harnessing technology to inform, empower consumers, has very much shaped the Commission's agenda in this area. Joel spearheaded, in fact, what we called our consumer empowerment agenda, which tackled issues like bill shock and mystery fees and cramming. I want to thank Joel personally for your work. It feels like you just got here yesterday, but of course it's been almost 3 years. You've worked very hard, and we appreciate your service, and looking forward to you continuing to stay active in this area of working to harness technology to benefit consumers in this wonderful changing communications landscape. So thank you, Joel, very much. We applaud your work. And Renata Hesse, our Senior Counsel for Transactions. There's Renata. Renata was I guess, a relative newcomer to the commission. I guess you came about a year ago. We had some major transactions to work on, and Renata brought just a terrific background coming directly from Wilson Sonsini, the well-known tech law firm. Renata had earlier experience in the Antitrust Division in the Justice Department and came in, hit the ground running, helped the Commission do its work in a professional, strong way. Renata, I will say personally that you provided wise counsel to me and to all of us during the process that you drove. It's always a leap to come into the FCC for the first time, particularly when it hasn't been part of your background. As you know, we talked about this at the time, and I've spoken about this publicly. I think it's very important that the FCC have people at the decision-making table from different backgrounds and experiences, having robust debates and discussions. And you both contributed to that because of your background, and you also made sure that we had processes that were consistent with that. So we wish you well and thank you for your service. And I certainly regret to confirm something we've already announced, which is that Paul Dessau will be leaving the agency. Paul, of course, has served and continues to serve, it's not over yet, as the chief of our Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis. Paul, you've done just an incredible job on so many fronts. You've re-energized OSP. You have been a key factor in re-energizing the entire agency, making sure that the spirit of serious analysis, fact-based work, sophistication about the marketplace and about technology was something that became core values of everyone who worked at the FCC. You led every day by example, focusing on the challenging economic, technological, other issues. You led by example through just the focusing everyone on the hard facts and issues we needed to focus on, and also through your willingness to roll up your sleeves and doing whatever needed to be done to make sure that other members of the staff, everyone on the commission, had thorough, sophisticated analysis underlying our work. Not a surprise that you've given us that for people who knew you before you came in. Of course, Paul served for a number of years at McKinsey as a partner in the tech and telecom practice, and so brought a lot of experience from day one. And as somehow, Paul, notwithstanding that background, your PhD in physics, and the incredible set of recommendations that we got about you, you managed to exceed our expectations, continually surprised us pleasantly with the quality of your work and the creativity of your thinking. There was one thing that we didn't know about, that I didn't know about when Paul came in, which was the value of your voice. At last year's, most of you probably don't know this, but it's true, at last year's CFC auction, the charity auction that we run every year, somebody paid $200 to charity to have Paul record their voicemail greeting, which I thought was outrageous because Paul charged me $400, which proves that you'll be very successful in whatever you do next. We hope that you stay in the space and that you continue to advise us, and that somehow we continue to have the benefit of the powerful lens through which you see the industry, where it's going. We'll miss you a great deal, and we thank you for your service. And with that, I know my colleagues join me in those sentiments, and we'll ask Madam Secretary to announce the next Commission meeting date.
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Wednesday, March 21st, 2012.
Thank you, and we are adjourned. Morning. How are you? I see some new faces.
Let's start with Jasmine from Reuters.
Hi, Chairman Janikowski. What do you think of LightSquared's complaints about the way the tests were run, and are there any circumstances in which you'd allow or ask for new testing of their network?
Well, as you saw, we'll be issuing a public notice today in which all parties will have a chance to make their case.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. When I say I actually mean a colleague of mine. So I'm just going to read it right off the thing. First, in light of the FCC's proposal to vacate the conditional waiver of LightSquared, are you confident that the Commission would succeed in any legal challenge mounted by the company, particularly one based on the argument that it abided by the FCC rules and its GPS receivers listening into its band that created the interference problem? And can you give us some timing on when you would like the FCC to move forward to consider adopting receiver standards?
So, of course, we have been and will be working very closely with our legal team here to make sure that everything is consistent with the law. As the NTIA, on your receiver point, as the NTIA said in its letter yesterday, this process has revealed issues around receivers, and addressing them will require a concerted effort of both of our agencies, other federal agencies, Congress, and all stakeholders.
Hi, Chairman. Paul Barbagallo with Bloomberg BNA. Along those lines, the NTIA recommended that the FCC take appropriate actions to mitigate against the impact GPS and other receivers may have to prevent the full utilization of spectrum. Can you tell us at this point what those appropriate actions might entail?
Well, I think, as we said last night, we'll be issuing a public notice. NTIA indicated that it would look at this issue as well. I think the important point that they made and that we agree with was that addressing the receiver issues will require a concerted effort on the part of everyone involved.
Why should we not view this as a black eye for you?
Well, we don't. As you know, for 2 years we've been working on many fronts to free up more spectrum for mobile broadband, to reduce regulatory barriers that precluded mobile broadband use. We freed up spectrum at WCS, 25 megahertz. We did the biggest release of unlicensed spectrum in white spaces in 15 years. We've done things like our wireless backhaul order, other steps to drive greater efficiency in spectrum use. Our pole attachments order is another example. Our tower siting order is another example. And, of course, the single biggest effort to unleash spectrum for mobile broadband is the incentive auction proposal that we have been advocating for 2 years. I'm hopeful that Congress will pass that soon and do it in a way that will enable the FCC to maximize the benefits for our economy and the American people. We've said for 2 years that we have to pursue many fronts to free up spectrum. Another area that we're working on is freeing up government spectrum as well. We've said it's really important. We've said that there will be challenges as we move to meet the spectrum demand challenges from new technologies. But we'll continue working across all of these fronts to free up spectrum, to reduce regulatory barriers, and to drive efficient use of spectrum.
Hi, Matt Schwartz. Hello. Hi, Matthew Schwartz, Communications Daily.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Commissioner Clyburn had said that there are technical issues that staff must study regarding broadband before any sorts of rules could be imposed. I'm wondering what is the time frame on this further study, and if you expect there to be a further notice of proposed rulemaking regarding broadband.
Right. So the first thing I'd say is that what we did today is very significant. We moved from having no outage reporting for the 31% of consumers who use VoIP, and we've been able to put in place an outage reporting system for VoIP calls. So now we have all regular and all VoIP calls covered. As Commissioner Clyburn said, the record that we had raised issues about broadband outage reporting. But as I also said, my expectation is that we will successfully work with the industry to have voluntary broadband outage reporting processes.
Josh Smith, National Journal. Does this decision or this potential proposal on Light Squared affect, or how does it affect Senator Grassley's concerns over the handling of the process and his request for information?
I've already addressed that in the past, and I don't have anything to add. You'd have to ask Senator Grassley.
Katie Ardmore with Communications Daily. Given the FCC's announcement last night regarding Light Squared's authorization to begin wireless services, does this decision add regulatory uncertainty for other spectrum holders? For example, might it affect the Dish Network review to use MSS spectrum terrestrially?
Sir, say that last part again, please.
For example, might it affect the Dish Network review to use MSS spectrum terrestrially?
I understand the question. You're new too, so welcome. As well, we don't comment on specific transactions that are pending, so I won't comment on that. As I said, we'll continue to work on many fronts to free up spectrum for mobile broadband. I won't review all the different ones that I mentioned, but it's very important. It will raise many challenges, and we're going to work together with all stakeholders, other agencies, Congress, to free up spectrum and drive efficient spectrum use because it's necessary to drive our economy and bring the benefits of mobile to all Americans.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Here we go.
Thank you, Chairman Janikowski. I'd like to invite up the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau and Chief Guerin to answer questions on the robocalls item.
Hi, good morning. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, does this have any effect for like polling firms? I mean, they have some complaints about how difficult it is now to get a telephone sample for a reasonable cost.
Yeah, polling survey firms?
Yeah, like Gallup, other outfits, Mason-Dixon, et cetera.
As long as it's purely informational, it's not telemarketing, and we would imagine at least some of those polling calls are purely informational or not seeking to telemarket. It wouldn't be affected by these rules.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
How does it do the rules or the proposed rules, do they apply equally to landline and mobile phones, or
I'm going to ask one of our TCPA experts to answer that because it's a bit complex.
The rules primarily affect telemarketing, robocalls, and texts, and require written consent, whether that sort of call is to a landline phone, a residential landline phone, or a wireless phone. The other thing to note is that, as the Commission addressed it today, written consent as defined under the e-Sign Act, which includes things like website forms, email, and the like.
So it does apply basically equally to both wireline and mobile?
If it's telemarketing, that's
If it's telemarketing.
Yeah.
There's some other rules that apply differentially to wireless and wireline,
That's
but
right.
this today applies equally, yeah. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, does anybody have questions for the Wireless Bureau on the cellular service rules? Do you guys have questions on that? No? I think you guys are good. Okay, the VoIP item, if the Public Safety Bureau wants to come up. Thank you.
If you have any questions.
First of all, what's the time frame going to be for implementing the VoIP outage reporting requirements?
So it takes a little while for us to get it into the record. Probably August time frame.
August timeframe. And I am curious about the further study that has generally been discussed regarding broadband. It seems somewhat amorphous. What kind of further study specifically are you guys looking at? And again, do you anticipate a further notice of proposed rulemaking imposing obligations on broadband providers?
I think it's premature for us to talk about a further notice at this particular time. I mean, one of the things in going through this process, we got a very interesting record, a lot of participation in the record, but this is one of the areas where I guess you could say we need more information. So our intention is to sit down with industry, with stakeholders, and talk about this. The intention all along is to not have people have to create things. We want to look at things that they look at themselves. So we'll talk to industry about that, how they do that, what the right levels and standards and thresholds and things are, to try and get a fulsome view of this before we make any other decisions on that. But the concept would be is if we could have some kind of voluntary reporting on broadband outages. Anything else that you want to say?
When you say you don't want them to have to create things, do you mean additional kinds of reporting that they don't already do themselves?
Right. I mean, all these companies, and this is true of the VoIP as well, all these companies have their own internal, visibility into how the network is performing and things like that. So our intention was never on VoIP or anything else for them to have to create new things. It would be great if we could have some type of standardized reporting so we can understand it across the industry. But we want to talk to them about what they do now, how they look at it, and what kind of voluntary procedures might be able to be put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chief Barnett. That concludes our press conference. Thank you.